Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Awakening Happiness video podcast episode. It's where we have conversations about life.
Okay, and
Good morning, Chris.
if you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button down there and click on the bell, and you'll get all the latest notifications of when we post a video, which is most days. So there you go.
Right, today's topic is, well, something that we hear a lot of times these days. Well, just in general, people just say, "Oh, that's just the way I am."
Yeah,
And it really triggers me because that's absolutely not true.
well, it's
And
definitely
they're
true.
just stopping themselves from achieving what they could be because they're saying that's just who I am.
It's true if you don't change,
Yeah.
right? So what it is, we human beings are not. They try and create a safe environment, a secure environment that kind of keeps them in this bubble that they're protected. And that's what everyone strives for. It's like, I'm just going to put that away for a rainy day, like, well, hang on, it's pretty rainy out there at the moment. But um, saving for rainy day, or create an environment where they're not going to get disturbed too much. And the problem is, it always gets changed. It's like it's just one thing that's the only guarantee thing in the world is change is inevitable. That's all there is. So just to say that's just the way I am is basically an excuse to put up with something that's not ideal, but it's something it's avoiding change, basically.
Yeah.
And
It's staying within the comfort zone of what's familiar.
hmm,
And the thing is, that's what the ego creates to prevent us from feeling pain.
yeah, that's it. That's its job. Its job is to. We've talked about the ego before. Its job is to basically look after you, but it just isn't your friend.
No.
It's like a. It's like if this was your friend in real life, you would have got rid of it long ago because it just gets you into trouble all the time. And on the assumption that it's looking after your safety and security, but it's not true. So anyway,
So it seems like we've exhausted the topic already.
no. So what
3 minutes into the live.
do you do about it?
What do you do about it?
Yeah. So if someone's saying that's just the way I am, and they're excusing themselves from the need to change, so how can they deal with that? I mean, first of all is to recognise that you're doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
first thing is to actually notice that you're saying that because sometimes it's not even obvious that you're thinking it or saying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
It's
very flippant
it's
statement, isn't it? Like, oh, like, aren't you, you're rushing about, just chill out for a minute. No, it's just the way I am. It's just the way I am, rushing about, putting myself under stress. But this is a choice, and you're choosing to be rushing around, moaning about.
because if you stop, there is a certain alternative or the reasons why we're doing what you're doing, and then excusing yourself, saying, "Oh, that's who I am." What is it that if you were to slow down, like in this case, somebody rushing around, what will happen if they were to slow down? What would be then the conversation that you what would be the punishment that the ego will start creating in the back of your head, in your little ear there? Oh, you stop now. What are you doing? Why are you stopping? You're not going to be judged for not being you. You will be considered lazy, or I don't know. You're going to be considered uninterested. Uh, So it's always a reason. There's always something else that the ego will produce to make you keep going what you're doing, because that's what it does. It likes habits, and it likes status quos. It doesn't like change. And that's the reason why it's making you do these things, because then if you don't, there is there's the what's underneath, underneath layer of why you're doing what you're doing, and saying that's just who I am.
I mean, we come back to, don't we, the inevitably we come back to, like, why am I continuing to rush around and put myself under stress? Why am I continuing that when I don't actually enjoy it because I'm complaining about it? So why am I doing it if I'm complaining? And we're using that's just the way I am, because there might be that they enjoy rushing around and putting themselves under stress because they can tell people that they're doing that, and that actually it's a way of almost like being like perfectionism is another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionism, and just consider this for the moment. Perfectionism, people wear it as a badge of honor. I'm a perfectionist, me. I'm like, it's got to be right. It's got to be right, right. And my dad was a bit like that. Like growing up, my dad. It's like my mum would always argue with him because he'd start every single room in the house decorating and never finish one. Right? and he's like, why don't you finish that one before you start the next one? And it was like, well, he can't finish it because it's not perfect, and he's still working on it. And then he said he gets a bit bored with it because it's nearly done and all the hard work's done. It's just the bits and pieces to finish it off. So he starts the next one because he can just get on and start painting, and that's enjoyable. Well, to a certain extent. So he's a perfectionist, and it's like, what is it about this perfectionism? Well, it's basically the striving to be the best or do your optimum or whatever. It's basically, or maybe it's to create an outcome where everyone says, oh, isn't that amazing? So you're basically seeking some kind of external validation of how amazing you are, right? So inside everything that we use, perfectionism, basically, it means you don't start, it's a massive job to start something because it's a long-term endeavor to finish it because it's got to be perfect. So if you don't think you can make it perfect, you won't start it. That's the first problem. Then when you do start something, it takes a hell of a long time, a lot of energy. You tend to be obsessed with it, and it basically, your whole life as a perfectionist is bashing yourself on the head saying it's not good enough, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. What kind of messages are you giving yourself? It's not good enough, it's not good enough. Like it's never good enough. It's never good enough because it could always be better, couldn't it? It could always be better. And then you start comparing yourself with other people and say, oh, they're better. They've done a better job than me. Oh, I must work on myself a bit more now because there's competition out there. This comparison thing comes in. It's like perfectionism is an absolute nightmare. And and then people, you say, oh, perfection is not a label of honor. It's a life of misery, right? And they go, oh, that's just the way I am. Oh, what? You want a life of misery, do you? Oh, don't start that. Then you get into a bloody argument, and then it's all like the swords come out, and you start lopping lumps off each other, and it's like it's not a good place to go with that. But it's just a deviation. That's just the way I am, isn't it?
It is, because then if you think about it, perfectionists deep down have confused being good, being worthy and lovable with doing things that make me being lovable. So they've well, I've struggled from that as well. So it's how much you're perfectionist on the outside is the reflection of how little you love yourself. And you think that maybe because you're not worthy enough on the inside, you need to compensate with your perfection, with your perfect creations, because then that means you are worthy because you did that.
You know, I mean,
You created it.
we could probably do another one. It's like the 80-20 rule, right? Where people use the
Mm.
80-20 rule, right? 80% of the money is with 20% of the people, this type of thing, right? And you know, it's a fairly well established theory which applies to quite a few situations. You know, you know, like there's 3% and there's 80-20, and there's my own creation, which is 70-30, right? And and, and I think that when I'm starting something off, I can achieve 70% of it on my own, right? I could get it good enough. I can get good enough to launch so that some people can begin to experience whatever it is. I did it with the software, by the way. You know, with the software, it was like, is 70% good enough? I'm not waiting for 100% because that would take me 10 years and I'd be swamped with other people doing the same thing and being better at it because they can throw more resources at it. So it was just it had to be good enough. And it's interesting because the thinking behind someone who says it's good enough versus someone who says perfect, right? You're talking about perfect. You might not consciously be saying, I people will love me more if it's better, or it depends on what you're doing, doesn't it? It depends on how you're applying it, right? But it never enters my head about I'm doing this for somebody else to do something back to me. It never enters my head. The only thing is, it's got to be good enough so that people will use it, right? Or they'll do something with it. It hasn't got to be perfect in my eyes. It's just got to be different, unusual, new, and good enough. Right? Good enough. Because I'm not expecting. I don't want people to say, "Oh, you're amazing. Look at that. That's perfect." I don't need people to say that, right? Because
Those people who actually need that, it's not that they know that they're doing it. Consciously, they are completely unaware of it. They
yeah,
just think it's great because they are amazing. But it's subconsciously what the drivers are that, because we don't believe that we are worthy of anything good and we are worthless people, then we need to create something that is worthy because we see it now, because we are not seeing ourselves as worthy. We want to create something that we created that is worthy, i.e., perfect.
maybe, yeah.
But we never even question it until we sit down and because we say, well, one reason is we never question it because, oh, that's who I am. I've always been like this. Or there's another one. I am like my parents, grandparents. It just runs in the family. We are like that.
So like that's another topic is what do we inherit from our parents and what do we have control over? So make a note of that one because that's quite
Well, okay,
odd.
keep going.
But so there's two things, right? If I look at my mum and dad, both of them have passed away, but you know, like we get to see firsthand who our parents are. I mean, first off, we just total love and you know, like because they're you know, like we can't do anything. We're rubbish as babies, aren't we? We just go to the toilet, we eat, and we go to sleep.
We are not rubbish. We are just a different type of
Well,
level of capability to manipulate this world.
I know, but what I'm just saying, there's not. We're not up to much except for getting our needs met, and we do that by crying
Mhm.
and being a complete pain. So, um, but when we start to realize, and even before we start to realize, our parents are teaching us things, and and as we get older, we can start to see the like my mum, massive worrier, right? Massive worrier. If she wasn't worrying, she wasn't happy. Right? She was just like you couldn't say anything to her without worrying about something, right? So she was a massive worrier. My dad wasn't. My dad was a perfectionist, right? And how it manifested in those two people, my parents, was that my my mum would always be saying, "Where are you going? What are you doing? When are you going to be back? What are you right?" So this was this constant, like she didn't know where I was, and we had no mobile phones then, by the way. So if she didn't know where I was and
Mm.
when I was going to be back, there was this, "Where are you? What are you doing? Why didn't you ring? Why didn't you ring? Where?" Like, yeah, I'm sitting here worrying about you. I'm off getting drunk, having a great time, right? And she's sitting there, and then. And my dad, it's like, look at that, Dad. Look what I've done there. Oh, yeah, you could improve it with this and you could improve it with. Never looked at 98%, which was amazing. Just looked at the 2%, which wasn't right.
And that's how I am, that
Yeah.
I'm a warrior. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. That's
So,
how I am. No,
yeah,
it's not how you are. It's how you're choosing to
yeah. So,
work.
interestingly, if I look at myself now, they are two traits I've not copied. I don't
Good for
worry.
you.
I don't worry. And I don't see perfection either, because it's perfect however it is, right? It's like it's just a way of seeing things. It's perfect anyway. Everything's perfect, and nothing's perfect. Like because perfection doesn't exist in nature. It's just what works. Just it is. It's what happens. It's just an event, and consequently, like I haven't and I think this is really important. We'll come on to this a different subject. Is like you're not obligated to pick up the things that your parents do. You can evaluate them and decide whether you want to do that as well.
But the thing is, like in my case, I never even questioned any of this.
Right.
So in your case, you had the whereabouts to think about it and say, oh, no, I'm not doing this because this is just too much worrying. I don't like it. This perfectionism, no, it's too much for me. I don't like it. You already had the measuring tool about like having enough love for yourself, I suppose, where you knew that this is not love. What my mom is doing is not loving herself, and my dad saying he's not loving himself. I'm gonna love myself.
Yeah,
In
but I
my
didn't say
case,
that. I
in,
didn't say
you
that.
didn't say it, but you had it strong into you that it was like your groundedness that you didn't get swayed in either of these two directions. In my case, I just discovered yesterday that the reason why I stress with things and really get overwhelmed at one point is and obsessed with things is because I need to finish them one day in advance, at least. So I have enough time to troubleshoot and not get caught out without
Oh,
unprepared or
that's
something.
just the way you are.
I'm just the way you are. I've been doing this all the time. Like, yeah. I'm just obsessed because I really like to do things very well, and then I need to do them quickly, and I need to do them yesterday. Why? And then when I stopped and realized what I'm doing, I'm just hurting myself because my shoulder was starting to cramp over here, my neck, especially after sitting for one day at the computer without moving too much, and my head being like this. I don't know, there's a cramp here. So why is this hurting me? Oh, it's because you've been doing this. Why have I been doing this? Why don't I stop? Is there a deadline? No. Well, you put the deadline yourself. I said, why did you put the deadline? Oh, because, and then I started hearing my grandmother's voice, not even my mom's. It's my grandmother's voice saying, oh, it's because you need to be prepared. Prepared for what?
Well, the
You
world
need to have extra time at the end. You finish it beforehand. You have enough time then to relax and to think about how you're going to troubleshoot anything that comes out as a problem. This doesn't make sense.
I mean, I know that I know the opposite to that. The opposite to that is what I do, right? Which is I keep playing table tennis, not doing my homework until there's no time left. Right? So I stay up all night to do the homework because, and then I get in early, and then I basically say, right, who's done their homework? Right, because it doesn't like the goal for me was not to to like get super grades or anything. It was just to appease the teacher. It'd set a deadline for the homework and just make sure that mine's gone in. Whether it's finished or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just at least it's not completely absent of anything. Like so. Yeah, I mean, you had one way of doing it with probably because of your parents and grandmother, and basically, my parents weren't, and I was reading about the different generations, and like, like my parents weren't really that interested in my homework. They really weren't. Like, and I didn't say that's a bad thing. I thought that was a good thing. Like, because I could fob them off till the homework's done, and there was no checking or validation, and off I went to play table tennis. Right. So if you done your homework, yeah.
Oh no, there was no such thing in my case, because if I didn't have my homework, the teachers would be reporting straight away in real time to my mom in the staff room.
Yeah.
And
So,
then there would be very, very severe consequences after that. So I had to be always prepared. Maybe this is where it came from. Oh, you need to be prepared.
well, the thing is, like, I always did enough. We've had this conversation to ensure that the teachers didn't contact my parents, which was a more difficult exercise than yours, of course. But they never got told, oh, Chris is not doing his homework. What's the matter with him? Like, or can you help him make sure he does his homework? Then that never happened. So I always just did enough to navigate a fairly peaceful way through the school. But today, God, it would be a nightmare. I don't know how I would manage to get away with it these days. Well, I think I'd go on that Chat GPT and just get that to sort.
Yeah. Yeah, even ChatGPT has a bit of a personality to itself. And when you say, oh, give me such and such text, it will give you a text, and then you can ask it to change it, and it will go about and change it. So you can write in the personality of such and such person, or in the style of such and such author. And it seems to be, I don't know why I mentioned that, that even AI can change, and we seem to be stuck in our ways, like that's who I am, as if we're thinking about our human selves as the crown of creation, yet we fall into these victim mentalities of that's who I am.
I think the thing is, right, is that we're analog, right? We're not digital, right? Digital is like, if you're adding up numbers, a computer can do it like a million times faster than a human being, right? And that's because that's not our speciality. Our speciality as humans is actually about caring for other humans, really. I think if you cut it down to the basics,
It's love, yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult for an AI to basically care for another person and to basically do that stuff which humans do, which is very emotional, and it's just about that community aspect, which I think is going to be a real tough one to crack for AI. But AI is great at like bringing in data, assessing it, manipulating it, and turfing out other things which humans struggle with. So yeah, I mean, AI has got some amazing potential, and humans. What we basically do is we're analog, and we believe we either can't change or we can't change very fast. So it's either going to be incredibly painful and long, or I just carry on.
Oh, it can be so easy. Oh, it can be so easy to change. Yeah. It's the best thing ever.
I understand, but like, and there's another topic for another day. But the point is that we have been taught that humans are analog. Well, maybe we haven't been told that, but it's true, and that we inherit things from our parents and we have no control over them. It's like, my mum had a lifelong back problem. And why haven't I got a lifelong back problem then? Oh, it's selective inheritance, right?
Well,
My,
some of you are lucky. You are lucky
yeah, yeah,
you didn't inherit it. Oh,
yeah.
you were so lucky. Like my dad used to say, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're healthy." It's hard work.
My sister doesn't have a
I
back
mean, it's
problem.
not hard, but it's a constant work.
Yeah. And my sister doesn't have a back problem particularly. She's had hip replacement. It's not a back problem. She swims all the time. My mum never used to swim. So there's a massive difference, right? And my dad used to do not really do exercise. He used to be in the garden and stuff, but he didn't used to make a point of, like yesterday. I could have driven down the shop, but I walked instead. Okay, it took me 20 minutes each way, 25 minutes each way. No real problem. It wasn't raining. It wasn't cold, so I just walked because I know that I need to walk. I ought to walk. I had to use my body because it was designed to walk. That's why I've got legs.
To move.
It's designed to go along. Not just sit in a car. So these things are choices that we make, and like my parents had a TV and they used to sit. I remember my granddad. Like one day, my granddad, and he's wax lyricing, right, which means he's telling me how wonderful it is to have a remote control to change the channel on the TV, right? I can't tell you how over the moon he was about this. It's like it stuck with me because he was so pleased with it. Look, look, look! I can change the channel from my seat.
Well, it was a big deal because otherwise you had to get up,
Yeah.
press some buttons.
Well, I don't even have a TV, so I don't have to. I neither have to get up, and nor do I have a remote control. It's like, but it was just, and my parents used to sit there and watch TV of an evening. I don't do that. So these are not things we're obligated to do because we've seen it with our parents. And I think the next generation, because life is so different now. Like that nobody watches TV. What you have to turn up at the same time every week to watch this program because they're only showing it on Friday evening, 8 o'clock. What kind of service is that?
Yeah,
you know,
it's changing.
it's just that they're not going to do it, right? They're going to say, no, I'll just wait till the whole series is out and I'll binge it on one night. That's what they might do. Or, I'm not going to sit around and wait till they show. God. So you can't, these worlds are changing massively. And it's quite fun to see it happen. Like people are going, oh, the kids of today, they're going to struggle because they don't get any playtime outside and everything else. And the kids of today go, playtime outside? What on earth are you talking about?
Why would I want that?
It's like, tell me how that's a good idea. You've got to go around your friends, knock on the door. I'll just message them on my phone. What would they do? You have to go around and knock, see if they're in. What if they're not in? Well, you've wasted your time, haven't you?
Well, we can talk about this on another
Yeah,
episode about keeping your word and how it used to be very important to be authentic and in the olden days, olden days like 20 years ago.
well, it's olden days, isn't it? But yeah, absolutely. But it's worth writing that down. Like, yeah, because you keep forgetting. Well, we both keep forgetting, don't we? We get so excited about the next topic, we forget the ones we've highlighted earlier. But yeah, all this is a symptom of it's just the way I am because you learn something and you put it in your mind, it becomes a habit, and then of course you're reluctant to change it because of the fear of the unknown. What might happen if this happens? What might?
And the thing is, when most of these habits that we now decided that this is who I am, this is who we are, they came to us when we were very little. So up to the age of 7, like Bruce Lipton likes to say, we kids are in a state of hypnosis. Like the brain works at a different wavelength, and everything the kids see becomes their own, either their own perception or how they either they perceive it for themselves or they borrow someone else's perception. And so this becomes then us. And he has this interesting analogy, like when you buy a phone and you want to go and play some music, but there's no music on the phone. You can't play any music. You need to first go and download the music. And then you play the music. Oh, I don't like this music. Well, then go and change it. Like on the phone, you can go and change it. Like delete this, go and download something else. Same with us. We download something so we can actually start manipulating this world around. And I mean manipulating, not in the meaning that we put into like controlling and having outcomes that we desire. I mean like working with it, processing it, going about and making sense of it. That's we learn how to do that by downloading these perceptions of others, and then we create our own as well. And then what if these perceptions were wrong? They had the wrong perceptions because they inherited them from their parents, and it just keeps perpetuating. And I really, when I learned this, now that I know it, there's no excuse to be saying, huh, that's who I am. This is how pain perpetuates in people, and I'm so triggered by this. You could tell, that was the reason why when I was going through my biggest, darkest time, like soul, what was it, the darkest time of the soul during my divorce. Everybody else seemed to be doing all right. They had similar kind of situations happen to them, yet somehow they went through it, and now they're kind of joyful and happy, and I was miserable, and I started to investigate why, and I learned this. So it's not just, it's just what my perceptions are, and what my ideas are, what my beliefs are about me mainly, and my place in this world. That was the reason why I was feeling so miserable. It's not, oh, that's who I am. I'm a victim now. Look, I've been cheated on, and I'm gonna be now go kill myself. Or do something about it.
Did you? did we tell the story where there was a woman who she bought a joint of meat, and then basically she cut the two ends off?
No, we haven't mentioned it, yeah, but it's so funny, that one. Keep going, yeah.
And
chuck them.
And chuck them away, yeah. And in the end, she quizzed her mum about it. Like, why?
It's because her husband was saying, "Hey, come on, what are you doing? Cutting a beautiful piece of meat and throwing it away? What's wrong with you?"
We've always done it. Then she checked in with her mum, and it was her mum's mum, and she had a fairly small roasting tin, and the only way that she could get the meat in was to cut the two ends off, to throw them away, because she didn't have room in the tin. It's got nothing to do with the actual meat, and the reason behind it was just that the grandmother didn't have a big enough tin to roast it in. So it's like it was completely redundant as an idea.
Yeah.
But everyone carried on, and it's like, I can tell you now that my parents, let's just look at this. Victorians were known in England for being very stiff upper lip and very reserved, and for not letting their feelings be seen, and it was like, just kids, you're seen and you're not heard, and all this kind of stuff, right? And my grandparents were brought up. My grandparents were brought up by their parents, who were Victorians, right? So they, in effect, lived a life of Victorians, right? And even though it was after the Queen Victoria, they still lived the life of Victorians, right? And they didn't have any of this self-development work that's available to people today. So basically, they just thought that's the way it is, right? No, not that's the way I am. That's just the way it is. So they bring up their kids, my mum and dad, the way they've been brought up, don't they? Because that's typically what we do. Like we may adjust a few things, but typically because
Well, we don't know anything else. Yeah.
So they're brought up like that. But my parents were after the Second World War. So although they were born during the Second World War, before the Second World War, they were brought up by Victorians with all the rationing going on and everything else. So they were all very frugal and making the most of every bit of food that was available because you didn't know where the next bit was coming from. So basically, they're brought up by people who were brought up by Victorians, and they had the war and the macroeconomics of the time, very, very difficult times with little money and everything else. And then when 1954 came along, which was when the end of the Great Depression, really, and things started to go like bananas, go really well. Then they entered into the state of like buying their own houses, and they'd done that before that, but basically life became a little bit easier. Credit started to become available, though my parents didn't indulge in that. But basically things started to get better, right? And then their kids, me, still got some hangovers from the Victorian days in terms of behaviour and what you could be doing in public and everything else. But in terms of possessions and frugality and stuff, we still had some of that in there, but it was changing. So we adapted, our generation adapted, and when and we were saying, well, I'm not bringing up my kids like my parents did, I can do better than that. And consequently, more entertainment, running kids around to different groups, and just basically pandering more to kids, allowing them to be heard, not just seen, and none of this smacking or whacking with a stick and all this kind of stuff, or like brutal kind of control mechanism. And it's taken 4 generations to get that out, and even now, not entirely, but mostly it's gone, those old times. So when you think about that, that's 120 years it's taken. That's how slow we are at changing. But like and I know that when we just say, oh, it's just the way I am, it's a load of drivel. You can be whatever you want to be whenever you want to be that. You just have to make a decision to do it. Be aware and make a decision to do it and stick with it. And just try it out, see what happens. What's going to happen? You're going to get a grade D or something. ABC passes. You got a grade D because your life hasn't quite turned out the way you thought it would at the start, and now you've gone on to. It's like it doesn't matter, does it?
And if there is an underlying subconscious belief that is driving all of this, you need to get rid of it or change it to something that is not driving you mad, but something that's making you happy. That's it.
Yeah. So I think, it's kind of got to the end of it now. I don't think we can screw any more juice out of this topic.
Squeeze.
Yeah. But it's kind of, it's kind of, but we're in control of our lives. It's not like society does put stuff on us, and it's up to us to decide whether we're going to accept it or not.
We have a choice. We always have a choice.
And it might be difficult for the people around you if you're going out on a limb and changing things, and it often is. But it's your life.
Yeah, you decide whether you want to run around to please everybody else or stop running around and please yourself.
Anyway, right. If you've liked this topic and you would like to hear more from us, or you want to go back and look at the archives, just click the subscribe button and the little bell thing so you get notified when we put new stuff up, because we do that regularly, probably too regularly. Anyway,
and share it if you found it useful. Share it. Right, thank you for watching.
Okay, bye for now.